The forgotten vault beneath Manhattan's most prestigious office tower would unlock a century-old royal conspiracy, international art thieves, and mysterious collectors hunting for treasures thought lost forever, all set in motion by one struggling janitor's accidental discovery while cleaning the CEO's suite after hours. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The midnight fluorescents cast harsh shadows across the polished marble floor as Marcus Reyes pushed his cleaning cart through the empty hallways of Thornton Tower. At 42, with silvery streaks appearing at his temples and permanent creases around his eyes, Marcus never imagined his life would come to this, working the graveyard shift, cleaning offices for minimum wage while drowning in debt. The faded ID badge clipped to his uniform read "Maintenance Staff," a sanitized corporate term for the man who emptied trash cans and scrubbed toilets while executives slept in penthouses. Marcus adjusted his baseball cap, pulling it lower over his tired eyes as he unlocked the executive floor with his master key. Once upon a time, Marcus had dreamed of a different life. With a degree in history from City College and a passion for antiquities, he'd worked at the Metropolitan Museum as a research assistant, hoping to eventually become a curator. His specialty was European royal artifacts, and he'd published several well-received papers on the mysterious disappearance of the Harrington collection, a set of crown jewels that had vanished during transport in the early 1900s. But life had other plans. His mother's extended illness had drained their modest savings. Then the museum's budget cuts eliminated his position. A failed marriage left him with child support payments he struggled to meet, and the subsequent depression had derailed his academic career completely. Now, 15 years later, he pushed mops through empty offices at night, trying to stay awake while the world slept. "Someday, Dad's going to get back on his feet," he would tell his 16-year-old daughter Zoe during their weekend visits. She would smile politely, but they both knew the truth. Marcus Reyes had become invisible, just another nameless service worker in a city that thrived on ambition and success. The executive floor of Thornton Tower housed the offices of Wellington Financial Group, one of the oldest and most secretive investment firms in Manhattan. Their wood-paneled corridors and oil paintings of stern-faced founders projected old money and power. Marcus had been cleaning these offices for nearly 3 years, yet he'd never once seen the firm's CEO, Richard Wellington IV. Tonight, however, was different. As Marcus wheeled his cart toward the CEO's corner office, he noticed the door was ajar, light spilling onto the hallway carpet. He hesitated, wondering if he should come back later. "Hello?" he called softly. "Maintenance. I can come back if you're working late." No response. Marcus pushed the door open wider. The spacious office was empty, though signs of a hasty departure were evident. A half-empty coffee cup sat on the antique desk. Documents were scattered across the polished surface. A suit jacket had been flung over a chair. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus entered cautiously, wheeling his cart to the waste bin beside the desk. As he bent to empty it, his elbow knocked against a drawer that hadn't been fully closed. It slid open, revealing a velvet pouch that tumbled onto the floor with a metallic clink. "Damn it," Marcus muttered, hoping he hadn't damaged anything valuable. He picked up the pouch and peered inside. A large brass key gleamed in the office light, old and ornate, with an intricate crown design worked into its handle. Accompanying it was a yellowed slip of paper with faded handwriting. "Basement Vault B, Family Archives Only." Marcus studied the key with professional interest. His museum training made him recognize its age immediately, late 19th or early 20th century craftsmanship. Why would the CEO of a modern financial firm keep such an antique key in his desk drawer? He should have simply returned it to the drawer and continued his cleaning. That would have been the sensible thing to do. But something about the key's craftsmanship and the mysterious note sparked the curiosity that had once defined his academic career. Marcus slipped the key into his pocket, telling himself he'd return it tomorrow. He just wanted to examine it more closely under better light. Besides, the basement was part of his cleaning route anyway. What harm could come from investigating? A little historical curiosity in an otherwise monotonous job. The service elevator groaned as it descended to the basement levels of Thornton Tower. Most of the building's lower floors housed mechanical rooms, storage areas, and the parking garage. Marcus had cleaned them all countless times, but he'd never noticed anything resembling a vault. The basement corridors were dimly lit and labyrinthine, with concrete walls and exposed pipes overhead. Marcus followed the numbered sections, A1, A2, A3, until he reached the B section, tucked away behind the building's massive boilers. There, partially hidden behind electrical panels and decades of forgotten equipment, stood a door Marcus had never noticed before. Unlike the modern service entrances, this one was solid oak with brass fittings, looking bizarrely out of place. Among the utilitarian surroundings, a small brass plate on the door read simply, Vault B. Marcus hesitated, his heart beating faster. This was trespassing, possibly worse. He could lose his job. But the historian in him, the part that had been dormant for 15 years, was now fully awake and buzzing with curiosity. With a deep breath, he inserted the ornate key into the lock. It turned with surprising ease, as if it had been recently oiled and maintained. The heavy door swung open silently, revealing a small antechamber. Motion-activated lights flickered. On, illuminating walls lined with dark wooden shelves filled with leather-bound ledgers and file boxes. But what caught Marcus's attention was the second door at the back of the room, a massive steel vault door with a combination dial. Beside it hung a small framed photograph of a stern-looking man in early 20th century formal attire. The nameplate. Below it read, Charles Wellington II, founder, Wellington Financial Group, 1902. The vault door was slightly ajar. Someone had been here recently and hadn't fully secured it. Marcus approached cautiously, his janitorial uniform feeling suddenly inappropriate for the historical weight of the room. With a gentle push, the vault door swung open. The space beyond was perhaps 20 feet square, illuminated by recessed lighting that activated as he entered. Unlike the dusty antechamber, the vault itself was immaculately maintained with climate controls humming softly in the background. The walls were lined with more shelves, but these held no ordinary documents. Display cases made of glass and what appeared to be custom security materials housed objects that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. His museum training immediately recognized what he was seeing: royal jewelry, crowns, scepters, and ornate ceremonial pieces from various European monarchies. Each piece was carefully mounted and preserved with museum-quality precision. At the center of the room stood a larger display case containing the most magnificent collection of all, a complete set of crown jewels, featuring a massive central diamond surrounded by rubies and sapphires. The craftsmanship was unmistakable to anyone with training in historical artifacts. The Harrington collection, Marcus whispered in disbelief. Every historian of royal artifacts knew the story. In 1908, during a period of political instability, the royal family of Harrington, a small European principality now absorbed into modern nations, had sent their crown jewels to America for safekeeping. The collection had disappeared during transport, creating one of the most enduring mysteries in the world of historical artifacts. Insurance had been paid. Museums had mounted exhibitions about the lost treasures. Marcus himself had written papers theorizing about what might have happened to them. And here they were, hidden in a basement vault beneath one of Manhattan's most prestigious financial buildings. Marcus approached the display with reverence, his hands shaking slightly as he studied the magnificent pieces. The central crown was exactly as described in historical documents, platinum and gold with the famous Harrington star diamond at its center, a 58-carat stone of perfect clarity. Beside the display case was a leather-bound journal. Marcus opened it carefully, finding handwritten entries dating back to 1908. The first entry made his blood run cold. September 17, 1908. Collection secured from transport vessel. Official story of theft and loss successfully planted. Insurance. Claim to be filed by royal representatives tomorrow. Our commission. 25% of insurance payout, plus retention of collection for private appreciation. A most profitable arrangement for all parties. C.W. Marcus flipped through the journal, his historian's mind racing to process what he was reading. Page after page documented a century-old conspiracy. The Harrington royals had orchestrated the theft of their own crown jewels, collected massive insurance payments, and allowed Wellington Financial to keep the actual treasures in exchange for a percentage of the fraud proceeds. The final pages contained more recent entries, including one dated just last week. After 115 years, market conditions and security concerns necessitate liquidation of the Harrington assets. Discreet buyers located through Swiss intermediaries. Collection to be moved next week. Estimated value, $120 million. Family vote approved, sale 7-2. R.W. R.W. Richard Wellington IV, the current CEO. The implication struck Marcus like a physical blow. He was standing in the middle of a 100-year-old crime scene. The Wellington financial empire, one of the most respected institutions on Wall Street, had been founded on insurance fraud and theft of royal treasures. And now they were planning to sell the evidence. As a historian, Marcus understood the cultural significance of what he'd discovered. These weren't just valuable jewels. They were historical artifacts that belonged in a museum, not hidden away in a basement or sold to private collectors who would keep them from public view. But what could a night janitor do with such information? Who would believe him, and more importantly, who would listen? The sound of the outer door opening sent a jolt of panic through Marcus's body. He quickly closed the journal and looked frantically for a place to hide. But the vault was small and sparsely furnished, offering no concealment. "Hello, is someone in here?" A woman's voice called out. Marcus stood frozen as footsteps approached the vault door. A slender woman in her early 30s appeared in the doorway, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm when she spotted him. She wore casual but expensive clothes, designer jeans and a silk blouse, with her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Who are you? What are you doing in here?" she demanded, her hand moving toward her pocket where a phone was visible. Marcus raised his hands instinctively. "I'm just the janitor. I found a key and got curious. I'm sorry. I'll leave right now." The woman studied him, her gaze taking in his uniform, the cleaning cart visible in the antechamber, and finally, the open journal beside the display case. Her expression changed again, this time to something more complex. "You've read it, haven't you?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded, seeing no point in lying. "Enough to understand what's in this room." The woman sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm Sophie Wellington, Richard's daughter." Marcus felt his heart sink. Of course, a Wellington family member. He was definitely going to lose his job now, possibly face charges for trespassing. "I'm Marcus Reyes. I work the night cleaning shift. I'll just go now and—" "Wait," Sophie said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "What did you think when you read the journal?" The question caught him off guard. That these are historically significant artifacts that should be in a museum, not hidden away or sold privately. I used to work at the Met, actually. In the European Collections Department. Something flickered in Sophie's eyes, surprise, perhaps even relief. "You're that Marcus Reyes? The one who published the paper on missing European royal collections during World War I." Now it was Marcus's turn to be surprised. "You've read my work?" Sophie's posture relaxed slightly. "I have a PhD in art history from Columbia. Your papers were part of my research on art repatriation ethics." She gestured around the vault. "Finding all this was supposed to be my dissertation topic, until my father discovered what I was researching and shut it down." Marcus studied her more carefully. There was tension in her stance, but it wasn't directed at him. "You don't approve of the family business?" "I'm the black sheep," she said with a bitter smile. "The one who thinks 100-year-old crimes should be rectified, not compounded by selling stolen treasures to billionaires for their private collections." She approached the central display case, gazing at the magnificent crown. "I've been trying to convince the family board to donate these to museums for years. Instead, they've voted to sell them off before anyone discovers the truth." Marcus could hardly believe what was happening. "So you're not going to call security on me?" Sophie shook her head. "Actually, I think you might be exactly what I need right now. Someone with museum credentials who can authenticate these pieces. Someone outside the family with credibility in the historical community." She studied him with new interest. "Why are you working as a janitor if you have expertise in historical artifacts?" Marcus felt the familiar weight of his failures pressing down on him. "Life happens. My mother got sick. The museum had budget cuts. I got divorced. By the time things stabilized, my career was derailed and I had a daughter to support." Sophie nodded with unexpected understanding. Sometimes our lives take unexpected turns. She pulled out her phone and checked the time. "My father's in Switzerland until Thursday, finalizing the sale arrangements. That gives us 3 days to document everything in this room and figure out how to prevent these treasures from disappearing into private hands forever." Marcus could hardly process what she was suggesting. "You want me to help you?" "I want us to help each other," Sophie said. "You get your career back on track with the discovery of the century. I fulfill my ethical obligation to my field and finally break free from family pressures to join the business." She extended her hand. "Partners?" Marcus stared at her outstretched hand, his mind racing. This was madness, risking his steady job, however humble, on a scheme involving stolen royal treasures and family betrayal. Yet he couldn't deny the pull of his former passion, the chance to make a real difference in the historical world. And beyond that practical consideration was something more personal. For 15 years he'd felt invisible, insignificant. Here was a chance to reclaim something of his former self, to show Zoe that her father could be more than just a man who cleaned up after others. He reached out and shook Sophie's hand. "Partners." As they stood surrounded by the glittering evidence of a century-old conspiracy, neither of them could predict how their lives would transform over the next 72 hours, or how the forgotten treasures of a long-vanished European principality would rewrite both history and their own personal narratives. The discovery that had begun with a single antique key would unlock not just a hidden vault, but a doorway to redemption that Marcus had long believed permanently closed to him. Sophie Wellington paced the small vault, her designer boots clicking against the polished floor as she formulated a plan. Marcus watched her, still processing the bizarre turn his night had taken. Less than an hour ago, he'd been emptying trash cans. Now he was partnering with a Wellington heiress to expose a century-old crime involving royal treasures. "We need to document everything," Sophie said, pulling out her phone and switching to camera mode. "Comprehensive photos, detailed notes, exact measurements. We need to establish provenance beyond any doubt." Marcus nodded, professional instincts kicking in despite years away from museum work. "We should catalog the collection piece by piece, cross-referencing with historical descriptions from the period. The Harrington collection was well documented before its disappearance. "I have those documents in my apartment," Sophie replied, along with copies of the insurance claim filings and newspaper reports from 1908. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You've been preparing for this?" Sophie's expression hardened. "For 3 years. Ever since I accidentally found a reference to the collection in my grandfather's papers. My family thinks I've given up the investigation because I stopped asking questions. In reality, I've been gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment." "And what makes this the right moment?" "This," Sophie said, showing him her phone screen. It displayed an email from Richard Wellington to the family board members. "Sale finalized. Transfer scheduled for Thursday night. After 115 years, this chapter of family history will be permanently closed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." "They're selling everything in 3 days," Marcus said, the timeline suddenly clear. "To private collectors. To a syndicate of ultra-wealthy collectors who specialize in acquiring items that technically shouldn't exist on the market," Sophie confirmed. "Items that can never be displayed publicly or acknowledged officially. The sale price is rumored to be around $120 million. Marcus whistled softly, looking around at the glittering treasures. Even with his academic background, he'd never been in the presence of so much historical wealth. Who's the buyer? That's part of the problem. The sale is being brokered through Blackstone Acquisitions, a shell company specializing in discreet transfers of controversial items. Art looted during wars, antiquities from restricted countries, historically significant pieces that should be in museums. Their client list is a who's who of billionaires who collect things no one should own privately." Marcus approached the central display containing the Harrington crown. Under the museum-quality lighting, the massive center diamond threw rainbow refractions across the vault walls. "This alone should be in the Smithsonian or the Met. It's not just a valuable jewel, it's a piece of history. That's why I've been fighting this," Sophie said, her voice taking on an edge of passion. "These pieces tell stories about our past. Private collectors buy them as status symbols or investments. They lock them away in private vaults where no one can study them, appreciate them, or learn from them." Marcus began examining the collection with a professional eye, noting details that only someone with specialized training would recognize. "The craftsmanship on these pieces is extraordinary. Look at the filigree work on this scepter. It's a lost technique from the Harrington Royal Workshops. There are maybe 3 living experts who could even identify this properly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Sophie watched him with growing interest. "You really know your stuff." "I used to," Marcus said, a touch of bitterness creeping into his voice. "Before life happened, what would you have done?" "If life hadn't happened?" Marcus paused, surprised by the personal question. "Finished my PhD. Become a curator, probably. Published books on lost royal artifacts." He gestured around the vault. "Ironically, I might have spent my career searching for the very item standing right in front of me." "It's not too late," Sophie said quietly. Marcus gave a hollow laugh. "I'm 42, working as a janitor with massive debt and a 16-year-old daughter who needs college tuition in 2 years. Academia doesn't exactly have a re-entry program for people like me." "Maybe not," Sophie acknowledged. "But discovering the Harrington collection might change that equation considerably." The implication hung in the air between them. If they succeeded, Marcus could reclaim his former career path in spectacular fashion. The janitor who discovered the century's greatest lost treasure would have universities and museums competing to hire him. "So what's the plan?" he asked, pushing aside personal considerations to focus on the immediate challenge. Sophie outlined her strategy. They would spend the night photographing and documenting the entire collection. Tomorrow, they would cross-reference everything with historical records and prepare a comprehensive report proving authenticity and provenance. On Wednesday, they would approach trusted contacts at the Metropolitan Museum and the FBI's Art Crime Division simultaneously. "We need to move quickly but carefully," Sophie warned. "If my father suspects what we're doing, he'll accelerate the sale timeline and these treasures will disappear forever. And the family will do everything possible to discredit us both." Marcus nodded, understanding the stakes. "I should be able to access the vault for the next 3 nights without raising suspicions. Cleaning this area is part of my regular route." They worked through the night with focused intensity, documenting each piece in the collection. Marcus's academic training proved invaluable as he identified specific historical techniques, maker's marks, and period-appropriate craftsmanship that would help authenticate the collection. As dawn approached, Sophie gathered her notes and backup storage devices containing thousands of high-resolution photographs. "I need to get these secured before the workday starts. My apartment has a safe even my family doesn't know about." Marcus checked his watch. "I need to finish my shift and make it look like everything's normal. What time should we meet tomorrow?" "I'll come back at midnight," Sophie said. "By then, I'll have compiled the historical documentation we need for comparison." As they prepared to leave the vault, Sophie paused. "Marcus, thank you. I've been trying to figure out how to stop this sale for months, but I needed someone with your expertise." "Don't thank me yet," he replied, carefully locking the vault door. "We still have to convince authorities to act on evidence obtained through somewhat questionable means." "You mean trespassing and family betrayal?" Sophie said with a wry smile. "Those would be the questionable means, yes." As they parted ways in the basement corridor, neither noticed the security camera discreetly mounted in the ceiling corner, or the red light indicating it was actively recording. Marcus completed his shift, meticulously cleaning the executive floors as if it were any other night. He moved through the motions automatically, his mind still processing what he'd discovered. The historian in him was electrified by the significance of the Harrington collection. The father in him calculated what such a discovery might mean for Zoe's future. By the time he arrived at his modest apartment in Queens, exhaustion had overtaken excitement. He barely had energy to shower before collapsing into bed, setting his alarm for 3 p.m. to give himself time before his next shift. When he awoke, the events of the previous night seemed almost dreamlike. Had he really discovered the Harrington collection? Had the daughter of one of New York's wealthiest families really enlisted his help in exposing her family's century-old crime? A text message on his phone confirmed it wasn't a dream. Research compiled. Meeting confirmed for midnight. Bring any historical references you can access. SW. Marcus spent the afternoon at the Queens Public Library, using their computers to access academic databases he still had login credentials for. He downloaded every scholarly article about the Harrington collection he could find, including his own papers from 15 years earlier. As he scrolled through his old work, he felt a pang of regret for the career path he'd abandoned. His writing showed promise, methodical analysis, and genuine passion for historical preservation. What might he have accomplished if circumstances had been different? At 6 p.m., he called Zoe for their daily check-in. His daughter lived primarily with her mother in Brooklyn, visiting Marcus on weekends when his work schedule allowed. "Hey, Dad." Her teenage voice carried both affection and the slight detachment that had grown between them as she'd entered adolescence. "How was school?" he asked, trying to sound normal despite the extraordinary secret he was keeping. "Same. As always, Mrs. Peterson liked my essay on Great Expectations. Oh, and I got that scholarship application for Columbia sent in." Marcus felt the familiar mixture of pride and anxiety. Zoe was brilliant, with realistic chances at top universities. But even with scholarships, The financial burden would be crushing. That's great, sweetheart. I'm really proud of you. Dad, you sound weird. Is everything okay? Marcus hesitated. How could he explain that her janitor father might have just made the historical discovery of the century? That within days, their lives might change dramatically? Everything's fine. Just tired. Hey, what if we did something special this weekend? Maybe the museum? Zoe's laugh held genuine amusement. The museum? We haven't done that since I was like 12. Maybe it's time to revisit old traditions, Marcus said, smiling at how perfectly this aligned with his current situation. You used to love. When I could tell you the real stories behind the exhibits. That was pretty cool, Zoe admitted. You knew stuff the tour guides didn't even know. It's a date then. Saturday at the Met? Sure, Dad. That sounds nice. After they hung up, Marcus stared at his phone, wondering what Zoe's life might look like if his partnership with Sophie succeeded. College without crushing debt, perhaps. Even the chance to see her father respected as a professional again, rather than pitied as the janitor with a failed academic career. When Marcus arrived for his shift that evening, everything seemed normal on the surface. He clocked in, collected his cleaning cart, and began his usual routine. But internally, he was hyper-aware of every security guard, every camera, every employee working late. At 11:55 p.m., he steered his cart toward the basement, taking the service elevator down with practiced nonchalance. The corridors were empty, the mechanical hum of the building's systems providing cover for his footsteps. Sophie was already waiting by the vault door, dressed in practical dark clothing that looked incongruously expensive. She carried a leather messenger bag bulging with documents. Any problems? She asked as he approached. Nothing obvious, Marcus replied, inserting the ornate key into the lock. But I can't shake the feeling we're being watched. The vault opened just as it had the previous night, the climate-controlled interior preserving the priceless artifacts in pristine condition. Sophie immediately began unpacking her research materials, spreading them across a small work table in the corner. I've compiled everything, she said, her academic thoroughness evident in the organization of her materials. Original auction catalogs from 1902 showing when the Harrington family acquired certain pieces. Royal inventories from 1905 documenting the complete collection. Insurance claim forms from 1908 reporting the theft. Newspaper accounts of the disappearance. And most importantly, private Wellington family correspondence discussing the acquisition and subsequent hiding of the collection. Marcus examined the documents, impressed by the comprehensive research. How did you get access to the family? Correspondence? My grandfather kept everything, Sophie explained. He believed in preserving family history, even the uncomfortable parts. When he died 3 years ago, I was the only one interested in the historical archives. My father and uncles were focused on the financial assets. Together, they began the meticulous process of comparing each artifact in the vault to historical documentation. The work was painstaking but deeply satisfying for both of them, trained academics finally practicing their craft on material of genuine historical significance. Look at this, Marcus said, carefully examining the royal scepter. There's an inscription inside the handle that matches exactly with the 1905 royal inventory description. And see this maker's mark? It corresponds perfectly with the Harrington royal jeweler's signature style. Sophie nodded, photographing the details he pointed out. The evidence is overwhelming. These aren't reproductions or similar pieces. These are the exact items reported stolen in 1908. As they worked, Marcus found himself increasingly impressed with Sophie's expertise. Despite her wealth and privilege, she was a genuine scholar with impressive analytical skills and deep knowledge of her field. Why did you choose art history? He asked during a brief break. Most Wellingtons go into finance, right? Sophie smiled ruefully. To my family's endless disappointment, yes. I was always the oddball who spent hours in museums instead of learning about hedge funds and market manipulation. My mother encouraged my interest in the arts, but my father saw it as a phase I'd outgrow. And when you didn't, he tried to redirect my passion into something useful for the family business, art as investment, cultural artifacts as alternative assets. When that failed, he simply tolerated my academic pursuits as an eccentric hobby that kept me occupied. Her expression hardened. He never imagined I'd use my education to expose family secrets. Marcus considered her situation. You're risking a lot. Your relationship with your family, possibly your inheritance. What about you? Sophie countered. You're risking your job, potentially facing trespassing charges. My job pays barely enough to cover rent and child support, Marcus said with a shrug. As for trespassing, discovering stolen national treasures worth over $100 million might balance that out in the court of public opinion. Fair point, Sophie acknowledged. But my reasons go beyond just doing the right thing historically. This is personal for me too. How so? Sophie hesitated, then seemed to decide Marcus deserved the full truth. My mother died when I was 14, cancer. During her final months, she made me promise to be better than them. I didn't understand what she meant then. It was only years later, when I began discovering the family secrets, that I realized. She'd known about the darker aspects of the Wellington fortune, but had been powerless to change anything. The personal revelation shifted something in their dynamic. This wasn't just about historical artifacts or career redemption. It was about keeping promises to those no longer able to fight their own battles. By 4 a.m., they had completed their documentation. The evidence was conclusive. The vault contained the authentic Harrington collection, stolen in a staged theft orchestrated by the Wellington family in collusion with Harrington royals in 1908. What happens tomorrow? Marcus asked as they carefully returned everything to its original position. I contact James Harrington at the Met, Sophie said. He's a curator in the European Collections Department and, ironically, a distant relative of the Harrington royal family. He'll know how to approach this from the museum perspective. And I reach out to Professor Williams at Columbia, Marcus added. He was my advisor before I left academia. He has connections with the FBI's art crime team. Perfect, Sophie. Agreed. We'll need law enforcement involved given the legal implications. But museums need to be part of the conversation about ultimate disposition of the collection. As they prepared to leave, a notification chimed on Sophie's phone. Her face went pale as she read the message. What is it? Marcus asked, immediately alert to her change in demeanor. My father. He's returned early from Switzerland. There's an emergency family board meeting tomorrow at noon. She looked up, her expression grave. The subject is accelerated timeline for asset liquidation. They're moving up the sale, Marcus realized. But how would they know to do that unless they know someone's been in the vault, Sophie finished. We need to move faster than we planned. Meet me at the Metropolitan Museum tomorrow at 10 a.m., East Entrance. They carefully secured the vault, erasing all evidence of their presence. As they parted ways in the basement corridor, Marcus couldn't shake a growing sense of foreboding. If the Wellingtons suspected their secret was in danger, what measures might they take to protect a century of deception? The next morning, Marcus called in sick for the first time in 3 years of employment. His supervisor sounded surprised but didn't question it. Marcus had accumulated weeks of unused sick time. He spent the early morning organizing their evidence, making backup copies, and preparing a concise summary of their findings. By 9:30 a.m., he was on the subway heading toward the Metropolitan Museum, the familiar route bringing back memories of his former daily commute. The museum rose before him, its grand facade a reminder of the career path he'd once walked. How many times had he climbed these steps as a young researcher, full of ambition and academic promise? Now he returned as a janitor with an explosive discovery that could reshape his future. Marcus checked his watch, 9:58 a.m. He scanned the crowds gathering at the east entrance, looking for Sophie's distinctive figure. Museum visitors milled about, tour groups assembled, but there was no sign of the Wellington heiress. At 10:15, he tried calling her cell phone. The call went straight to voicemail. By 10:30, anxiety had bloomed into genuine concern. Sophie had been meticulously punctual in their previous meetings. Her absence now, without communication, suggested something had gone very wrong. At 10:45, Marcus's phone rang with an unknown number. He answered immediately, hoping it was Sophie. "Mr. Reyes?" A male voice asked. "This is Detective Michael Cortez with the NYPD. I'm calling about Sophie Wellington." Marcus's heart sank. "Is she all right?" "Ms. Wellington was involved in a hit-and-run incident this morning. She's at Mount Sinai Hospital. During admission, she repeatedly asked staff to contact you." "Is she—" Marcus couldn't finish the question. "She's in stable condition, but sedated. She's suffered a concussion and several broken ribs. The doctors expect a full recovery, but she'd be hospitalized for at least several days." "I'll be right there," Marcus said, already moving toward the subway entrance. "Mr. Reyes," the detective continued, "Ms. Wellington was also quite insistent about something else. She kept mentioning evidence and Thursday night. Does that mean anything to you?" Marcus hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "We're working on a research project together. Thursday was an important deadline." "I see," Detective Cortez said, his tone suggesting he found this explanation incomplete. "One more thing, Mr. Reyes. The vehicle that struck Ms. Wellington didn't leave typical accident evidence. The driver appeared to deliberately target her, according to witnesses. We're investigating this as a potential assault." The implications struck Marcus with chilling clarity. This was no accident. The Wellingtons had discovered Sophie's betrayal and taken decisive action to stop her. And if they'd targeted her, Marcus might be next. "Thank you for letting me know, Detective. I'll be at the hospital as soon as possible." As Marcus hurried toward the hospital, his mind raced through their options. With Sophie incapacitated, the responsibility for exposing the Wellington conspiracy fell solely to him, a night janitor with a complicated past and questionable access to the evidence they'd collected. Thursday night was less than 36 hours away. If he failed to act, the Harrington collection would disappear into private hands forever, and a century-old crime would remain unexposed. Worse, Sophie's sacrifice would be in vain. For 15 years, Marcus had accepted his diminished circumstances, believing his chance to make a meaningful contribution to history had passed. Now, standing at this unexpected crossroads, he realized that his greatest professional challenge lay not behind him, but directly ahead. The janitor who had discovered the century's greatest lost treasure would now have to become its unlikely savior, facing down one of New York's most powerful families with nothing but historical knowledge and a newfound determination to reclaim both the stolen artifacts and his own derailed potential. Mount Sinai Hospital buzzed with the controlled chaos typical of Manhattan medical centers. Marcus navigated the crowded lobby, his mind racing through contingency plans as he approached the information desk. After identifying himself, he was directed to the 4th floor, where a uniformed police officer stood outside one of the private rooms. "I'm Marcus Reyes," he explained to the officer. "Detective Cortez called me about Sophie Wellington." The officer checked his ID, then nodded. "She's resting. Doctor says visitors are limited to 5 minutes." Inside the room, Sophie looked unnervingly vulnerable against the white hospital sheets. A bandage wrapped around her head, and various monitoring equipment beeped softly beside her bed. Her normally animated face was pale and still, with bruising visible along her left cheekbone. "Sophie?" Marcus said quietly, approaching the bedside. Her eyes fluttered open, taking a moment to focus. Recognition dawned slowly. "Marcus, you came." "Of course I came. What happened?" Sophie glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice. "It wasn't an accident. Black SUV, tinted windows. It swerved deliberately onto the sidewalk as I was leaving my apartment." She winced as she tried to shift position. "They took my bag with all the documentation, my phone too." Marcus felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "Your father?" "Most likely his security team. The Wellington family doesn't handle threats themselves. They outsource the unpleasantness." Despite her condition, anger flashed in Sophie's eyes. "The board meeting must have been about us. Someone saw us in the vault." "The security cameras," Marcus realized. "I should have checked for surveillance." "It doesn't matter now," Sophie said. "What matters is they're accelerating the timeline. According to my cousin who still talks to me, the Harrington collection is being moved tonight, not Thursday." "Tonight? That changes everything." Marcus checked his watch. It was just past noon. "We've lost all our documentation. How can we prove what we found?" "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Sophie reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong despite her injuries. "Not everything is lost. I backed up our photos to a secure cloud server last night. The password is Harrington1908. You can access it from any computer." She paused, gathering strength. "And I made one call before they hit me. To James Harrington at the Met. He's expecting you at 2 o'clock. Marcus nodded, processing this information. "What about law enforcement?" "James has contacts," Sophie said, her voice weakening. "He'll know who to trust. The Wellingtons have influence with certain departments, but not the federal agencies that handle major art crimes." A nurse entered, checking Sophie's vitals with professional efficiency. "Time to rest, Miss Wellington. Your 5 minutes are up." Sophie tightened her grip on Marcus's hand before releasing it. "The key is still in your pocket, isn't it?" Marcus patted his work pants reflexively, feeling the weight of the ornate brass key. "Yes, that's our only access now." "They won't change the locks until after the collection is moved. Too suspicious." Her eyes began to close as the medication took effect. "You're the only hope for the Harrington collection now, Marcus. The only one who can stop a century of theft from being completed." As the nurse ushered him out, Marcus felt the full weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. He was no longer just an assistant in this discovery. He was now the principal actor in a high-stakes historical drama with powerful opponents and dwindling time. Outside the hospital, Marcus found a quiet coffee shop where he could use their Wi-Fi. He accessed the cloud server using Sophie's password, relieved to find all their photographs intact, hundreds of high-resolution images documenting every piece in the collection, including close-ups of makers' marks, distinctive craftsmanship, details, and historical inscriptions. He downloaded everything to his own email as backup, then headed toward the Metropolitan Museum. The familiar steps felt different now, not nostalgic reminders of his past, but the threshold to a potential future. The European Decorative Arts Department was housed in the museum's north wing. Marcus had spent countless hours here during his previous career, studying craftsmanship techniques and historical design elements. Now he returned as neither visitor nor employee, but as the bearer of extraordinary historical news. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. James Harrington was waiting in his office, a space that perfectly reflected his dual identity as scholar and aristocrat. Museum catalogs and research papers were meticulously organized alongside family photographs showing Harrington at various European estates and formal events. "Mr. Reyes," he said, rising from behind his desk. Sophie's call was rather dramatic. Something about the Wellington family and royal artifacts? His British accent carried the polished tones of elite education, but his expression showed genuine concern. And now I hear she's been hospitalized in a hit and run? It's all connected, Marcus explained, taking the offered seat. What I'm about to tell you will sound incredible, but I have photographic evidence to support every claim. Over the next 20 minutes, Marcus outlined their discovery, the vault beneath Thornton Tower, the Harrington collection preserved in its entirety, the Wellington family's century-long deception, and the imminent sale that would send the treasures into permanent obscurity. Harrington listened with increasing amazement, occasionally asking precise questions that revealed his expert knowledge of the collection's history. When Marcus finished, the curator was silent for several moments, processing the implications. If what you're saying is true, this would be the most significant recovery of lost royal artifacts in decades, Harrington said finally. And a rather personal matter for my family, distant relations though they may be. It's true, Marcus confirmed, opening his laptop to show the photographs. Every piece from the 1905 royal inventory is in that vault. The craftsmanship is unmistakable to anyone with training in historical European decorative arts. Harrington leaned forward, studying the images with a professional eye. His expression shifted from skepticism to wonder as he scrolled through the extensive documentation. Extraordinary, he whispered, pausing on an image of the crown with its massive central diamond. The Harrington star. I've only seen it in black and white photographs from the period. He looked up sharply. And you say they're moving this entire collection tonight? According to Sophie's information, yes. Selling it to private collectors who will keep it hidden from the public and scholarly community forever. Harrington's aristocratic reserve cracked slightly, revealing genuine outrage. That cannot be allowed to happen. These are historically significant artifacts that belong in museums, not locked away in private vaults as status symbols for billionaires. That's exactly what Sophie said, Marcus noted. She would. Sophie Wellington is one of the most promising scholars in our field. I've reviewed her doctoral work, brilliant analysis of ethical considerations in art repatriation. Harrington closed the laptop decisively. Right, this requires immediate action at multiple levels. He picked up his phone, dialing with the confidence of someone accustomed to institutional authority. Agent Blackburn? James Harrington at the Metropolitan Museum. I need to report a major art crime in progress. Yes, it's extremely time-sensitive. Today, in fact. The call lasted several minutes, with Harrington providing concise details about the collection and its historical significance. When he hung up, his expression was cautiously optimistic. FBI art crime team is sending someone immediately. Agent Blackburn has been pursuing illegitimate art sales for years. She's trustworthy and not easily intimidated by wealthy families. Will they be able to move quickly enough? Marcus asked. The Wellingtons have significant influence. The Bureau operates independently from local authorities where the Wellingtons might have connections, Harrington assured him. More importantly, this case involves international cultural heritage theft, which gives federal agencies clear jurisdiction. As they waited for the FBI representative, Harrington studied Marcus with scholarly curiosity. Sophie mentioned you were once in academia? European decorative arts? Almost 15 years ago, Marcus confirmed. I was working on my PhD in historical artifact authentication when life took a different turn. Your expertise is evident in these photographs, Harrington observed. The details you captured would only be recognized by someone with significant training. Why did you leave the field? Marcus gave the abbreviated version of his story: family illness, museum budget cuts, personal setbacks that had cascaded into a complete career derailment. Harrington listened thoughtfully. The academic world loses too many promising scholars to life's practicalities. It's a tragedy for the field and for the individuals. Before Marcus could respond, Harrington's assistant announced the arrival of Special Agent Diana Blackburn. The FBI representative entered with brisk efficiency, a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and the focused intensity of someone who didn't waste time on preliminaries. "Dr. Harrington," she acknowledged, then turned to Marcus. "And you must be Mr. Reyes. I understand you've discovered the Harrington collection after 115 years. "Not exactly discovered," Marcus clarified. "More like stumbled upon a century-old crime scene." Agent Blackburn smiled slightly. "In my experience, most major art recoveries begin with someone stumbling onto something they weren't supposed to see. Show me what you found." For the second time, Marcus presented the evidence, this time with Harrington adding historical context about the collection's significance. Blackburn asked pointed questions about the Wellington family, the vault security, and the planned sale. "Blackstone Acquisitions," she repeated when Marcus mentioned the broker. "We've been tracking their operations for years. They specialize in moving controversial artifacts between ultra-wealthy collectors, always staying just at the edges of legality. This would be their largest transaction to date." "Can you stop the sale?" Marcus asked. "With this evidence, we can certainly intervene," Blackburn confirmed. "But timing is critical. If the collection is moved from its current location, recovery becomes much more complicated." "They're moving it tonight," Marcus emphasized. "Then we need to act immediately." Blackburn made several calls, mobilizing a team and coordinating with the Financial Crimes Division that had jurisdiction over the insurance fraud aspects of the case. As the federal response machinery began moving, Marcus realized a crucial factor remained unaddressed. "I still have the vault key," he said, pulling it from his pocket. "Without this, they can't access the collection easily." Blackburn studied the ornate key. "That could be extremely useful, especially if we can control access to the vault until we secure a warrant." "I'm scheduled to work tonight," Marcus said. "I could ensure the area remains under observation." Harrington and Blackburn exchanged glances. "That's a significant risk," the curator warned. "If the Wellingtons targeted Sophie, they wouldn't hesitate to harm you as well." "I'm aware of the risk," Marcus acknowledged. "But I'm also aware of the stakes. This isn't just about recovering stolen artifacts. It's about historical justice and ensuring these treasures don't disappear from public access forever." After further discussion, they developed a plan. Marcus would report for his normal shift, maintaining his regular cleaning routine while monitoring the basement area. Agent Blackburn would position her team discreetly around Thornton Tower, ready to intervene when the Wellington representatives arrived to move the collection. Meanwhile, other agents would be preparing the legal documentation necessary for seizure of the artifacts. As the meeting concluded, Harrington drew Marcus aside. "Whatever happens tonight, you've already performed an invaluable service to the historical community. If there's anything I can do to support you professionally after this is resolved, please don't hesitate to ask." The offer, coming from a respected curator at one of the world's premier museums, momentarily overwhelmed Marcus. For years, he'd considered his academic career irretrievably lost. Now, through an extraordinary chance discovery, paths were potentially reopening. "Thank you," he managed. "Right now I'm just focused on making sure the collection is secured." "Properly, of course," Harrington agreed. "But afterward, I hope you'll consider returning to the field. Expertise like yours shouldn't be lost to budget cuts and life's misfortunes." As Marcus left the museum, his phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Hope you're feeling better. Dad, don't forget about Saturday at the museum." The message brought a smile to his face. If all went well tonight, their Saturday museum visit might be very different from what Zoe was expecting. By 7 p.m., Marcus was back at Thornton Tower, dressed in his familiar janitor's uniform and pushing his cleaning cart with practiced ease. To anyone observing, he appeared to be conducting his normal shift. Only he knew that an FBI team was positioned around the building, that his phone contained a direct line to Agent Blackburn, and that the future of priceless historical artifacts depended on his actions over the next few hours. His supervisor had been surprised to see him after his earlier sick call, but had accepted his explanation about feeling better and not wanting to miss a shift. The routine work, emptying trash cans, vacuuming carpets, cleaning restrooms, provided a strange comfort amid the extraordinary circumstances. At 9:30 p.m., Marcus guided his cart toward the basement levels, taking the service elevator down as he did every night. The corridors were quiet, with only the mechanical systems providing background noise. He began his regular cleaning routine, working methodically closer to the hidden vault door. At 10:45 p.m., his phone vibrated with a text from Agent Blackburn. 3 black SUVs approaching building from south entrance. Stand by. Marcus positioned himself near the electrical room adjacent to Vault B, ostensibly cleaning but maintaining clear sightlines to the hidden door. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline sharpening his senses. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, multiple people moving with purpose rather than the casual pace of maintenance workers. Marcus ducked slightly behind his cart, continuing to wipe down surfaces while watching from his peripheral vision. 5 men in expensive suits appeared, led by an older gentleman whose bearing radiated authority. Even without an introduction, Marcus recognized Richard Wellington IV from news photographs, Sophie's father, and the current CEO of Wellington Financial Group. Behind him walked 4 younger men, carrying specialized equipment cases that Marcus suspected contained tools for artifact transport. "Mr. Wellington," Marcus said, straightening up as if surprised by their presence. "Evening, sir. I'm just finishing up here." Wellington regarded him with the brief, dismissive glance of someone accustomed to service personnel being invisible. "Carry on, we won't be long." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, continuing his cleaning while maintaining a clear view of the group. Wellington approached the hidden door to Vault B, reaching into his pocket. His expression shifted from confidence to confusion, then alarm. "The key," he said sharply to one of his associates. "Where's the spare key?" "You said you had it, sir," the younger man replied, his voice carefully neutral. Wellington patted his pockets with increasing agitation. "I had it in my office. It's gone." His eyes narrowed as he turned toward Marcus, really seeing him for the first time. You're not the regular night cleaner for this section." Marcus maintained his composure. "I've been working this route for 3 years, Mr. Wellington." Something flickered in Wellington's expression, recognition or suspicion. He studied Marcus more carefully. "What's your name?" "Marcus Reyes, sir." The name clearly meant nothing to Wellington initially, but one of his associates leaned forward, whispering something in his ear. Wellington's face darkened. "Reyes, the historian. You're working with my daughter." Marcus abandoned the pretense, standing straighter as he faced the man directly. "Sophie and I discovered what your family has been hiding for 115 years, Mr. Wellington. The Harrington collection belongs in museums, not private collections." Wellington's practiced corporate mask slipped, revealing cold fury. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. That collection has been in our family's protection for generations." "Protection?" Marcus challenged. "You mean theft? Your great-grandfather stole those artifacts as part of an insurance fraud scheme, and now you're planning to sell them to private collectors who will hide them away forever." "Those artifacts are Wellington family property," Wellington insisted. "Acquired through legitimate business arrangements with the Harrington Royals. Arrangements that defrauded insurance companies and kept historically significant treasures from the public for over a century," Marcus countered. "The documentation is clear. Your family has been concealing evidence of a major historical crime." Wellington stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "My family built this city while academics like you wrote papers nobody Reads, "We create jobs, fund hospitals, build infrastructure." The Wellington name stands for something in New York. Yes, Marcus agreed calmly. Fraud, apparently. Wellington's composure broke. "Give me the key, janitor, now, or I'll ensure you never work in this city again." "I don't have it," Marcus lied. "But the FBI does, along with complete documentation of the collection and your family's century-long deception." The color drained from Wellington's face. "You're bluffing, am I?" Marcus pulled out his phone, showing the active text conversation with Agent Blackburn. "Federal agents are surrounding this building as we speak. The art crime team has been tracking Blackstone acquisitions for years. Your buyers are already under investigation." Wellington stared at the phone, then at Marcus, rage and calculation warring in his expression. "You have no idea the forces you're challenging. My family has survived far worse threats than a failed academic playing detective." "Maybe," Marcus acknowledged. "But can your family survive federal charges of insurance fraud, possession of stolen cultural artifacts, and conspiracy to sell illegally obtained treasures? Because that's what you're facing now." The elevator doors opened at the end of the corridor, revealing Agent Blackburn, flanked by 4 additional FBI agents, all wearing jackets with the Bureau's insignia clearly visible. "Richard Wellington?" Blackburn called, approaching with confident strides. "I'm Special Agent Diana Blackburn with the FBI Art Crime Team. We have a warrant to search and secure the premises identified as Vault B, containing the historically significant Harrington collection." Wellington's associates exchanged nervous glances, clearly unprepared for federal intervention. Wellington himself maintained his imposing stance, though Marcus could see calculation in his eyes. "This is private property," Wellington stated. "These artifacts have been in my family's possession for generations." "Possession isn't ownership, Mr. Wellington," Blackburn replied, unmoved. "Especially when that possession began with documented fraud. We have evidence linking your family to a major insurance scheme dating back to 1908, involving collaboration with Harrington royal family members to fake the theft of historically significant artifacts." She handed him the warrant, which he read with increasing agitation. "This is absurd." Your lawyers will have ample opportunity to present your case," Blackburn interrupted. "But right now, we're securing these artifacts as evidence in an ongoing federal investigation into art theft, insurance fraud, and attempted sale of culturally protected items." As the agents moved past Wellington toward the vault door, Marcus felt a surreal sense of historical justice unfolding. After 115 years, the Harrington collection was about to emerge from secrecy into proper historical context. "You, Wellington," sighed, focusing his icy gaze on Marcus. "You've destroyed a century of family legacy. For what? So these trinkets can sit in museum cases instead of private collections? What difference does it make who owns them?" "All the difference in the world," Marcus replied. "In private collections, they're status symbols for billionaires. In museums, they're educational tools that connect people to their past. They tell stories about craftsmanship, about royal history, about how art and politics intersected." "Romantic." "Nonsense," Wellington scoffed. "They're assets, nothing more." Marcus shook his head. "That's where you're wrong. They're pieces of human heritage that deserve to be studied, appreciated, and preserved for future generations. Your great-grandfather stole that opportunity from the public for over a century. You were about to extend that theft indefinitely." As Agent Blackburn approached for the key, Marcus felt a profound sense of professional fulfillment that had eluded him for 15 years. His expertise, so long unused in his janitorial role, had proven crucial in identifying and authenticating one of history's most significant lost collections. "The key, Mr. Reyes?" Blackburn asked. Marcus handed over the ornate brass key, watching as the FBI team prepared to open the vault that had concealed its secrets for 115 years. Whatever happened next, legal battles, museum negotiations, international repatriation discussions, the Harrington collection would finally emerge from darkness into historical light. And perhaps, Marcus reflected as he watched the vault. Doors swing open. The same could be said for his own dormant career, now unexpectedly reawakened by an antique key and the courage to use it. The next 72 hours unfolded with the surreal intensity of a historical documentary being filmed in real time. Federal agents worked methodically to document and secure every piece in the Harrington collection, treating the vault beneath Thornton Tower as the major crime scene it truly was. Art historians, authentication experts, and international cultural representatives converged on New York as news of the discovery spread through professional channels. Marcus found himself at the center of this historical whirlwind, his expertise suddenly in high demand. The Metropolitan Museum had temporarily cleared space in their conservation laboratory, and Marcus worked alongside James Harrington to catalog the collection properly for the first time in over a century. "The craftsmanship on this coronation ring is extraordinary," Marcus observed, examining the piece under specialized lighting. The goldsmith used a combination of techniques that were considered innovative for the period. You can see the influence of both traditional Harrington Royal Workshop methods and emerging French styles. Harrington nodded appreciatively. "Your eye for historical detail remains exceptionally sharp, Mr. Reyes. 15 years away from the field doesn't seem to have dulled your expertise at all." The compliment warmed Marcus, reaffirming his sense of professional identity that had been dormant for so long. Working with these artifacts, handling pieces he had once studied only through grainy historical photographs, felt like reuniting with a part of himself he'd believed permanently lost. Meanwhile, the legal machinery of federal prosecution was grinding into motion. Richard Wellington and 3 other family board members had been charged with multiple felonies related to possession of stolen cultural property, conspiracy to sell protected artifacts, and the century-old insurance fraud that had initiated the entire scheme. The Wellington family had immediately deployed an army of high-powered attorneys, but the evidence was overwhelming. The journal entries documenting the original conspiracy, combined with the family's continued efforts to sell the collection, created a legal nightmare that even the best lawyers would struggle to defend. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. On the 3rd morning after the raid, Marcus arrived at the museum's conservation lab to find Sophie Wellington waiting for him. She looked pale but determined, her arm in a sling and a fading bruise still visible on her face. "You should be in the hospital," Marcus said, genuinely concerned. Sophie shook her head. "I checked myself out against medical advice. I couldn't miss this." She gestured toward the laboratory where the Harrington collection gleamed under specialized conservation lighting. 115 years of family secrets finally exposed. "How are you handling the fallout?" Marcus asked gently. "Your father's arrest, the family scandal." "Better than expected," Sophie admitted. "I've spent years preparing myself for this moment, ever since I first discovered hints about the collection in my grandfather's papers. What about you? From night janitor to historical hero is quite a transformation." Marcus smiled self-consciously. "I'm still processing it all. Yesterday I was interviewed by the New York Times and NPR about my pivotal role in recovering the century's most significant lost royal collection. This morning, Columbia University called to discuss a potential position in their historical authentication program." "You deserve it," Sophie said firmly. "Your expertise was crucial in identifying and authenticating these pieces. Without your background, we might never have understood what we were looking at." Marcus gestured toward a nearby workstation where a stack of her research papers sat. "Your work was equally important. Your family genealogical research provided the context that connected all the historical dots. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sophie's expression turned reflective. My mother would be proud, I think. She always believed our family's wealth came with responsibility, not just privilege. This, she gestured around the laboratory, is fulfilling a promise I made to her 15 years ago. Their conversation was interrupted by James Harrington, approaching with barely contained excitement. The director has made a decision. The Metropolitan Museum will be mounting a special exhibition of the Harrington collection beginning next month. Royal Treasures, Rediscovered, will tell the complete story, the original craftsmanship, the staged theft, the century of concealment, and the remarkable discovery. That's wonderful, Sophie said. The pieces will finally be accessible to the public and scholars. There's more, Harrington continued. The museum board has approved the creation of 2 new positions specifically for this project. A senior authentication specialist to oversee the technical analysis of the collection, and a research historian to document the complete historical narrative. He looked meaningfully at Marcus and Sophie. Given your unique expertise and connection to this discovery, the director hoped you might both consider applying for these positions. The offer hung in the air between them, a professional lifeline for Marcus and a new beginning for Sophie outside her family's shadow. Before either could respond, Harrington's assistant appeared with urgent news. The representatives from Harrington Principality have arrived, she announced. They're waiting in the director's conference room. Though the Principality of Harrington had long since been absorbed into other European nations, descendants of the royal family had maintained a historical society dedicated to preserving their cultural heritage. News of the collection's discovery had brought them to New York with remarkable speed. In the conference room, Marcus and Sophie found themselves facing 3 distinguished Europeans, whose formal manners couldn't quite conceal their excitement. The eldest, Baron Friedrich von Harrington, was in his 70s with aristocratic features and impeccable English. Mr. Reyes, Miss Wellington, he said, rising to greet them. On behalf of the Harrington Historical Foundation, I cannot adequately express our gratitude for recovering these irreplaceable artifacts. For generations, we believed them lost forever. The meeting that followed was both historically significant and personally validating. The Harrington representatives listened intently as Marcus and Sophie explained their discovery, asking detailed questions about the collection's condition and the circumstances of its concealment. The historical documentation suggests your ancestors were actually complicit in the original deception, Sophie noted carefully. The Wellington family journals indicate the royal family cooperated in staging the theft to collect insurance money during a period of financial difficulty. Baron von Harrington nodded gravely. Our archives contain hints of this unfortunate arrangement, though the details were deliberately obscured. The early 20th century was a challenging period for many European royal houses. Political instability and changing economic conditions led some to desperate measures. The question now, interjected the museum's director, is the appropriate disposition of the collection. There are multiple legitimate claims to consider. The discussion that followed explored the complex intersection of historical justice, cultural heritage rights, and modern museum practices. The Harrington representatives had a reasonable claim based on royal provenance. The U.S. government had legal standing due to the fraud component. Insurance companies could theoretically pursue restitution for century-old claims. And various museums had compelling arguments for public display and scholarly access. What if we considered a different approach entirely? Marcus suggested. Instead of focusing on exclusive ownership, what about a collaborative international exhibition? His proposal was bold but practical. A traveling exhibition that would allow the collection to be displayed in multiple countries, accompanied by comprehensive historical context explaining both its royal origins and the remarkable story of its disappearance and recovery. The Harrington collection could become a case study in cultural heritage preservation, Marcus explained, his academic passion fully reawakened. Students and scholars around the world could study not just the craftsmanship of the pieces, but also the ethical questions surrounding their history. By the end of the meeting, a framework agreement had been reached. The collection would remain at the Metropolitan Museum for initial conservation and exhibition, then travel to major museums in Europe, including a special installation in what had once been Harrington Royal Territory. Ownership would be shared between the Harrington Historical Foundation and an international cultural trust, ensuring the collection would never again disappear into private hands. As the meeting concluded, Baron von Harrington approached Marcus privately. "Your expertise regarding these artifacts is remarkable, Mr. Reyes. The Foundation would be honored if you would consider serving as a consulting historian for our portion of the exhibition development." Another opportunity, another door reopening. To the career path Marcus had reluctantly abandoned 15 years earlier. "I would be honored," he replied, still adjusting to his rapidly changing circumstances. Later that afternoon, Marcus stood alone in the conservation laboratory, studying the magnificent Harrington crown with its massive central diamond. The Harrington star caught the light, refracting it into countless rainbow patterns across. The workbench, quite something, isn't it? Sophie said, joining him. To think that stone has witnessed over a century of history, hidden away in darkness. Until now, Marcus observed. Now it'll be seen by thousands of people, studied by historians, appreciated for both its beauty and its historical significance. Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about what my father said to you during the raid. About these being just trinkets and assets. He never understood that objects like these are physical connections to our past. They tell stories that help us understand who we are and where we came from." "That's why museums matter," Marcus agreed. "They're not just buildings full of old things. They're repositories of human stories, achievements, and sometimes failures. They help us learn from history instead of just repeating it." The philosophical discussion was interrupted by Marcus's phone ringing. The caller ID showed Zoe's number. "Dad?" His daughter's voice sounded uncharacteristically excited. "Are you really on the news? My history teacher just showed us a CNN segment about some janitor who discovered stolen crown jewels, and Emily says it's definitely you." Marcus laughed, still adjusting to his sudden visibility. "It's a long story, Zoe, but yes, that's me." "Dad!" Zoe's voice pitched higher with amazement. "You're famous. And they said you used to be a museum researcher or something. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "It was a different chapter of my life," Marcus explained gently. "One I thought was closed permanently." "Well, it's the coolest thing ever," Zoe declared with teenage enthusiasm. "Way better than Brian Mitchell's dad, who's just some boring investment banker. My dad discovered crown jewels. The whole school is talking about it." Marcus felt a complex wave of emotions. Pride that his daughter was seeing him in a new light, gratitude for the chance to reclaim his professional identity, and a bittersweet recognition of how much he'd kept hidden during his years of struggle. "We still on for Saturday at the museum?" he asked. "Are you kidding? Wild horses couldn't keep me away," Zoe replied. "But instead of you showing me the exhibits, I want the whole story of how you found those jewels, every detail." After ending the call, Marcus found Sophie watching him with a gentle smile. "Daughter?" she asked. 16 going on 30, Marcus confirmed. "She's just discovering her father isn't quite the failure he appeared to be." "You were never a failure," Sophie said firmly. "Life dealt you difficult cards, and you played them with dignity. You supported your family, maintained your integrity, and kept your knowledge alive even when you couldn't use it professionally. That's not failure, that's resilience." The week that followed transformed Marcus's life in ways he could never have anticipated when he first found that ornate brass key. Columbia University offered him a position as an adjunct professor in their Historical Artifacts Authentication program, with flexibility to accommodate his work with the Harrington Collection exhibition. The Metropolitan Museum created a specialized consultant role that would allow him to apply his expertise to both the Harrington pieces and other European collections. Financial security, professional respect, and the chance to reclaim his academic identity all emerged from what had initially seemed like simple curiosity about an antique key. 6 weeks later, the Metropolitan Museum unveiled Royal Treasures Rediscovered to international acclaim. The exhibition combined spectacular artifact displays with comprehensive historical context, telling the complete story of the Harrington Collection's creation, disappearance, and remarkable recovery. On opening night, Marcus stood in the crowded gallery watching visitors marvel at treasures that had been hidden from public view for over a century. Museum patrons read display texts explaining the craftsmanship, historical significance, and the extraordinary story of discovery. Many stopped to examine the ornate brass key, now displayed in its own case with an explanation of its pivotal role in the collection's recovery. "Quite a change from emptying trash cans at Thornton Tower," observed a familiar voice beside him. Marcus turned to find Agent Blackburn surveying the exhibition with professional satisfaction. "The FBI is quite pleased with how this turned out," she continued. "Cultural artifacts returned to public access, a major art crime ring disrupted, and significant progress in our ongoing investigation of Blackstone acquisitions." "What about the Wellingtons?" Marcus asked. "Any updates on the legal proceedings?" "Richard Wellington has agreed to a plea deal," Blackburn revealed. "The family will pay substantial restitution to the insurance company's successor firms, plus a multi-million-dollar settlement to the Cultural Heritage Foundation managing the collection. In exchange, he avoids jail time, though his reputation and the family's standing are significantly diminished." "And Sophie?" Marcus asked, scanning the crowded gallery for his unexpected partner in historical discovery. "Ms. Wellington has distanced herself completely from the family business," Blackburn replied. "Last I heard, she's establishing an independent foundation focused on identifying and recovering other lost historical artifacts that may be concealed in private collections." As if summoned by their conversation, Sophie appeared from the crowd, accompanied by Baron von Harrington and James Harrington. The three had been working closely on the international exhibition plans, with Sophie serving as liaison between the historical foundation and the museum world. "Marcus," she called, weaving through admiring museum patrons. "You need to see this." She led him to a section of the exhibition he hadn't yet visited, a display focused on the discovery itself. There, alongside photographs documenting the recovery operation, hung a large museum text panel titled "The Discoverers." The panel featured professional portraits of both Marcus and Sophie, accompanied by biographical text that read in part, "The Harrington Collection's remarkable journey from royal treasury to hidden vault to public exhibition would not have been possible without the expertise, courage, and ethical commitment of two unlikely partners, Sophie Wellington, whose research skills and moral conviction led her to challenge her own family's century-old deception, and Marcus Reyes, whose specialized knowledge of historical royal artifacts allowed him to recognize the collection's authenticity and significance. Their discovery represents not just the recovery of priceless historical treasures, but a powerful reminder that expertise, persistence, and ethical purpose can overcome even the most entrenched systems of privilege and secrecy. Marcus stared at the display, momentarily speechless. Throughout his career struggles, the abandoned academic path, the years of invisible labor, the quiet desperation of supporting his family through menial work, he had never imagined his name would appear on a museum wall, acknowledging his contribution to historical preservation. "They got it right," Sophie said softly beside him. "None of this would have happened without your expertise. Or your courage," Marcus added. "Standing against your own family couldn't have been easy. Easier than watching priceless historical artifacts disappear forever," Sophie replied. "Some things matter more than family loyalty, especially when that loyalty requires complicity in wrongdoing." As they contemplated the exhibition spreading before them, gleaming treasures finally emerged from darkness into their proper historical context. Marcus felt a profound sense of professional fulfillment. The key that had opened the vault had also unlocked the door to his own redemption, proving that expertise and knowledge were never truly lost, only temporarily unused. The following Saturday, Marcus arrived at the Metropolitan Museum's main entrance to find Zoe waiting impatiently, practically bouncing with excitement. At 16, she was navigating the complicated terrain between childhood and adulthood, but today her enthusiasm was purely childlike. "Dad," she called, waving energetically. "I can't believe we're actually doing this. My friends are so jealous." As they entered the museum, Marcus noticed how differently the staff treated him, no longer an anonymous visitor, but a recognized colleague whose expertise had helped create their most talked-about exhibition in years. Security guards nodded. Respectfully, docents smiled in recognition. The transformation in his professional standing was still disorienting after years of invisibility. "So this is where you used to work?" Zoe asked as they moved through the grand entrance hall. "Many years ago," Marcus confirmed, "before you were born." "And now you're back," Zoe observed, linking her arm through his. "Full circle. More like a spiral," Marcus reflected. "Returning to a similar place, but at a different level." As they approached the Royal Treasures exhibition, the crowd thickened noticeably. The discovery had captured public imagination, drawing record attendance numbers. Visitors pressed forward, eager to glimpse treasures that had been hidden for over a century. Near the entrance, Marcus spotted a familiar face. James Harrington was personally conducting a tour for major museum donors, explaining the historical significance of the collection and its remarkable recovery. "Ah, Mr. Reyes," Harrington called, gesturing him over. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have the extraordinary good fortune to be joined by one of the key figures in this remarkable discovery." Marcus found himself suddenly the center of attention, as Harrington introduced him to the wealthy patrons whose donations helped sustain the museum's operations. These were people who would never have noticed him during his years as a janitor, people whose offices he might have cleaned while they slept in Manhattan penthouses. Mr. Reyes's expertise in historical artifact authentication was crucial. In identifying the Harrington collection, Harrington explained, without his specialized knowledge, these treasures might have disappeared into private collections forever. As the donors asked questions about the discovery, Marcus answered, with the confidence of someone reclaiming his professional identity. Beside him, Zoe watched with undisguised pride, seeing her father not as the struggling janitor she'd grown up knowing, but as a respected expert whose knowledge had changed the course of history. Later, as they moved through the exhibition at their own pace, Zoe stopped before the display containing the ornate brass key that had started everything. "It's so weird to think that something so small could change so much," she observed. "One key opened that vault, but it also kind of unlocked your whole life, didn't it?" Marcus smiled at his daughter's perceptiveness. "That's a pretty good way of putting it. Do you think people have different keys in their lives?" Zoe asked, her teenage philosophy emerging. "Things that could open doors to different futures if they just noticed them." "I think so," Marcus agreed. "But you need two things: the courage to use the key when you find it, and the knowledge to recognize what you've discovered on the other side." As they continued through the exhibition, Marcus reflected on how thoroughly his life had transformed in just a few short weeks. From financial insecurity to professional respect, from invisibility to recognition, from silent expertise to active contribution, all because he'd followed his curiosity about an ornate brass key. The journey wasn't just about professional redemption, though. It was about showing Zoe that setbacks, however devastating, didn't define a person's ultimate value or potential contribution. It was about demonstrating that knowledge and expertise, once acquired, remained valuable even when circumstances forced them temporarily underground. Near the exhibition's conclusion, they paused before the magnificent Harrington crown with its spectacular central diamond. The 58-carat Harrington star caught the museum lighting, refracting it into countless rainbow patterns that danced across the display case. "It's beautiful," Zoe whispered. "And now everyone can see it, not just some billionaire in a private vault." "That's why this matters," Marcus explained. "These aren't just pretty objects, they're connections to our shared human history. They belong to everyone in a way, which is why museums exist, to preserve these connections for future generations." As they prepared to leave, Marcus's phone chimed with a text message from Sophie. "National Gallery in London, confirmed for February exhibition. They want you to give the opening lecture as lead authentication expert. Interested?" Another door opening, another opportunity to apply the expertise he'd maintained through 15 years of professional exile. Marcus showed the message to Zoe, whose eyes widened. "London? Dad, that's amazing. Can I come during spring break?" "We'll make it work," Marcus promised, already envisioning their first international trip together, not as a struggling janitor and his daughter, but as a respected historian sharing his professional world with his child. As they exited the museum into the crisp autumn air, Marcus felt profound gratitude for the strange twist of fate that had placed that ornate key in his path. What had begun as simple curiosity had evolved into complete life transformation, proving that expertise was never truly wasted, only waiting for the right moment to prove its value. The janitor who had discovered the century's greatest lost treasure had reclaimed not just priceless artifacts, but his own derailed potential, demonstrating that even the most unlikely places might conceal extraordinary opportunities for those with the knowledge to recognize them and the courage to pursue them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.